Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, and long time no see, but I'm back again, and we are back with Teamfight Tactics, Lore and Legends, and it's time for a PBE rundown of our 16th set. It's pretty exciting. I'm really excited to show you this set. Don't want to overhype it or anything, but pretty proud of what we've done here. So this is a pretty cool set. A lot to go over, so I'm going to try to go quick. Hopefully this video isn't like 3 hours long. But let's dive right into it. Now, normally when we start these things, we would start going over like the champs and the traits and being like, that's pretty cool. But for this set, we have to talk about the set mechanic first, because the set mechanic is going to be the big story of this set, and it's going to change the way you build teams and the way you play TFT. So what is the set mechanic? Our set mechanic is called Unlockable Champions. And what this allows us to do is, for the first time, we have a TFT set that instead of having 56 or 60 champions, it has 100 champions. That's right, 100 champions. And you're going to see how this works, but it's pretty exciting. Now, we couldn't just have 100 champions, add them to the pools. No one would 2-star anything. That'd be pretty rough. So instead, we've created this system called Unlockable Champions. So there's 60 standard champions that work the exact same way you'd expect, like any other set, and there are 40 unlockable champions. Now, what is an unlockable champion exactly? So you can find out when you look at, for example, in your team planner, and here we're looking at the 2 costs, and you can see Aphelios and Ashe, they're normal champions. But like Bard, Graves, and Orianna, they have this lock icon on them. That means they are an unlockable champion that are not in your pool until you unlock them that game. Now, how do you unlock them that game? So for example, if you mouse over Orianna here, you can see that Orianna requires you to field 3 unique Piltover units. So if you put 3 unique Piltover units on your board, well, the next turn, you'll unlock Orianna. And now for the rest of the game, Orianna will be able to appear in your shop, which is pretty cool. And so you'll have Orianna, you can add her to your pool because you've chosen to go into Piltover for a little bit. You can also check this out by going over to your traits. This is how I personally usually check these things. It's like, oh, I'm playing Piltover. And you can see here that Orianna and T-Hex are unlockables that have the Piltover trait. You can mouse over them there, and you'll be like, oh, cool. I just need to get 3 Piltover units. So in this case, maybe I run Caitlyn and Vi and Loris, put them in, Orianna unlocks, and great, now I've got 4 Piltover. Love it. So that's kind of how it works. There's also a little button near your lock icon where you can pull this up and it will show you things that you have unlocked. So for example, in this game here, I've already unlocked Bard because I re-rolled 4 times before the stage 2 carousel. But I could also put things in my team planner. So for example, if I put Graves in my team planner, it'll put it in here and I can remember. And so this is a nice little menu. Our UI team did a bunch of work here. The other thing that's kind of cool is as you're doing this in game, you'll see a little pop-up over it sometimes. Now you can turn this pop-up off if you want. Right here where it says Team Planner Unlockables and then there's that notify. You can turn that off if you don't like it. But, so for example, as I'm rolling, it'll be like, hey, you're starting to unlock Bard. You might want to consider it. So pretty cool system. And then some extra details here. So once you do it, so I've put the 3 Piltover champions in and the screen will go, da-da, Orianna unlocked. Now here's the other twist that's really cool. As soon as you unlock it, your next shop, guaranteed to have one. So for the first time, there's kind of an ability of like, okay, I know I wanted Orianna. You're not going to get screwed out of it, right? You can just do the unlock condition, unlock it, and add it to your team. Pretty neat. And like I said, once you've unlocked it, it'll show up in your shop. It'll have that little unlock icon, and it'll be there for the rest of the game. So pretty cool. Now, some other notes here. Unlockable champions have the same number of copies as any normal champion in the pool. So for example, if you have an unlockable 5 cost, there are 9 copies. Same odds as any other champion as well. Like once they're in your pool, they're just part of your bucket. That's how it works. Now, every player can unlock the same champion. If all 8 players wanted to go Piltover using our Orianna example, all 8 players could unlock Orianna. But they don't have to, right? Maybe only you unlock Orianna, someone else unlocks Graves, someone else unlocks none of the above. That's what makes it unique, is that you get to choose the path of the champions you want to add to your pool so that you have a nice shop and can hit the things you want. Now, I know a lot of people might be thinking this, so I wanted to cover this, but unlockables reset each game. They do not carry over between games. So this isn't some weird progression system or anything like that. This is when you start the game, all 40 unlocked champions are locked, and you need to do things if you want to play them that game. So, and we'll go over some of their unlock conditions. I won't go over all of them. You'll be able to check those out on like various sites. Some are easy, some are hard. And that's one thing I want to talk about here is that not all unlockable champions are equal. They're balanced around their unlock conditions. So what that could mean is like a 5 cost that has a pretty easy to do unlock might be balanced like a standard 5 cost. But as you'll see later, we have some 5 costs that are like, you got to do some hard stuff to unlock, and they're not going to be equal, right? Like that has to be taken into account with their balance. So that's kind of the fun of it though. And you'll see when we talk about specific examples. So other than that, that is the set mechanic. The set mechanic is that you start a game with 60 champions in your pool. You do things to add champions to your pool and build the team you want. And that's it. Standard TFT. Pretty cool. So let's go over the champions, and that'll kind of show you which ones are unlockable and where we've put our efforts here. So for example, here are all the 1 cost champions. There are 14 1 costs, pretty standard. There are no unlockable 1 costs. The unlockable mechanic is not something that's really going to be buffing a lot of reroll comps. You'll see a couple that we'll talk about. But one of the goals of the unlock system is to diversify late game comps especially. With only 12 to 13 4 costs and 8 5 costs, end game diversity, even in a perfectly balanced meta, can get pretty repetitive. And so this is a big stab at trying to widen that quite a bit. And so you'll see a lot of the unlockable champions are going to come up later. But for now, here are the 1 costs. And so we have Anivia. Anivia is pretty cool in that her damage by herself is a little low, but if the target is chilled, she'll automatically crit. So you can build like crit items or crit amplifiers or things like that and get that guaranteed crit, which is pretty cool. So definitely works well with Freljord. But that being said, there are other champions that provide chill as well. So you get some it doesn't have to be Freljord, right? So for example, Nico, who is a 2 cost tank, will chill. And so you can pair Anivia and Nico together, which is pretty neat. Blitzcrank, pretty standard 1 cost tank, nothing to write home about. Briar is going to be your 1 cost melee champion, pretty powerful in the early game. As you've gotten used to at this point, 1 cost melee champions are really strong early, falls off pretty late. Caitlyn's got that usual snipe that can take down a key target. This time it does have the overflow damage though. So if you stack her up enough and she kills something, that'll bounce to the next target. So some good damage there. Alawi, another standard 1 cost tank. Jarvan, you'll enjoy this if you've been playing TFT for a long time. Jarvan is a 1 cost tank that when he casts his spell, gives your team attack speed. Yes, we've reprinted the old Galaxy's Jarvan 1 cost. Now, that being said, it's obviously not 70% attack speed like that one was, but it is cool, and he's a great utility unit that can give your team some extra attack speed. He provides Defender, which is a really good, trait, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, Jhin, auto attacker whose spell is shoot 4 shots that hit pretty hard. Pretty cool. Kog'Maw is a rapid caster. He's like a Shojin blue buff kind of user, 30 mana, does like an AoE shot. It's like his Q or whatever. He's not a Ginsu's user this time. Lulu. I want to talk about Lulu for a bit because Lulu is kind of important in the sense that with 100 champions, if you've been watching TFT for a long time, we talk about how like every champion needs to be a carry and there aren't many utility units. But with 100 champions, we can break that rule. And so Lulu, I'll tell you right now, she's strong in the sense that she stuns a target for 2 seconds and provides a lot for your team. She's not a primary carry, so don't try to make reroll Lulu a thing. It's not intended to be a thing, and we're going to have a few champions like that aren't meant to necessarily be primary carries. So calling that out now, Lulu is still very valuable, can turn on 2 Arcanist really early, which is a good trait, obviously good in Yordle, but not a primary carry. Kiana will be good for your Ixtal openers. We'll talk about that later. Rumble, Yordle tank, pretty standard. Shen, another tank, pretty standard. Sona, rapid fire, has some heal built in though. So early game especially, that heal can be pretty valuable. Not necessarily as much AP damage, but again, another like 30 mana user. And then Viego is important. If you get an early 2-star Viego, you can unlock Shadow Isles, and we'll talk about Shadow Isles later, but getting an early 2-star Viego, Shadow Isles is something you can consider, which is a unique trait, so that's where his appeal comes in. Other than that, he's a melee attacker that ramps up the damage as he goes, so yeah. All right, 2 costs. Now, these are the 2 costs that are not unlockable. These are the standard 2 costs. And here we have one of our first cool new traits that I like is Targon. Aphelios is a Targon unit, and for those of you that might remember threats, Targon are like threats. Targon have no traits, but they're very powerful. And so Aphelios in particular will provide that sort of sunder for your team, be pretty strong early, good stuff. Now, Targon's not exactly threats, and we'll talk about why later, but generally they're threats, and so that's kind of how they work. Ashe, pretty cool carry. Ginsu's user, pretty standard. Has a stacking mechanic where if you itemize her early, you'll unlock Tryndamere, and the 2 of them can work together, so you'll see that in the next page. But so Ashe and Tryndamere make a really good pairing. Cho'Gath is a pretty standard 2-cost tank, but he has an AoE CC, which is unusual for a 2-cost. So a lot of people might scream some frustration at the AoE CC that he can provide. Echo is a melee DPS champion, kind of weird, but he does have that disruptor trait, which is pretty valuable, and he works well in Zon. But he's definitely a weird one. I don't actually expect a lot of primary Echo carries, but there's a couple ways that works. Neeko, very valuable 2-cost tank. She unlocks Ixtal, which is important, but also Arcanist and Defender, so very valuable traits. Expect Neeko to be a pretty popular pick early, and as I said, she also provides chill, so she can synergize with like Freljord and Sejuani and stuff like that, so yeah, she'll be pretty popular. Rek'Sai. Rek'Sai is probably our earliest scary champion. He's a 2-cost, or she's a 2-cost melee champion, AD, but will dive around and can get to your backline if you're not careful. It won't be on the first cast or anything, but she can definitely do some big damage if she gets back there. All right, Scion. If you like stacking HP, Scion is your guy. Scion starts off a little weak, lower base stats than normal, but every assist will get him permanent HP, and it's like 20-25 per assist or something like that. Pretty hefty number. If you 3-star Scion, though, that number jumps up to like 60. So getting an early 3-star Scion and then stacking that HP and then playing that around Bruiser, very fun if you're somebody who likes stacking HP. Good stuff. Teemo, backline AP caster, little bit of dot, but it's more upfront damage than the dot. Don't think of him as like a pure Malzahar, because the initial burst is actually pretty big, but does some good damage, really good Yordle carry. Tristana's the AD side of the Yordle comp, which we'll talk about later. Twisted Fate, kind of like Ashe and Tryndamere, Twisted Fate and Graves. You itemize Twisted Fate, you'll unlock Graves. They make a nice duo that you can play. Vi here. Do want to call out that Vi says Piltover Zon Defender, not a tank. Vi is a damage dealer. So consider, things like IE, Sterix, but Vi is a damage dealer. Xin Zhao is pretty cool. Standard tank. Has a unique hero augment, which we'll talk about later. And then Yasuo. Yasuo, pretty good carry in Ionia. And if you 3-star him, you'll unlock Yone later, which we'll talk about. And that's a pretty cool thing you can do. So, all right. And then we have the unlockable champions. Now, again, I'm not going to go over everything exactly. Stuff like Poppy will kind of just unlock as you're playing Demacia or Yordle or Juggernaut. Pretty easy. I already mentioned Tryndamere and Graves, both of which it's like itemize their pair and then they work together. Orianna we already saw in the example. Yorick is interesting because Shadow Isles, the way Shadow Isles works is all of their champions except Viego are unlockable champions. You put in Viego, and that's going to unlock Yorick. Now you have 2 Shadow Isles, and you'll begin gaining souls. And then as you get more souls, you unlock the next champion and the next champion. And it's this cool little mini vertical that you can play. So Yorick is the next step in that. And then finally, Bard. Bard is, if you're somebody who likes reroll, consider Bard. Now, to get Bard, you have to press reroll 4 times before the stage 2 carousel. So you're going to spend some money. But when Bard is in your comp, based on how if you win or lose after you play him, he'll start generating extra units that you have on your board or generating rerolls. So he's kind of like an old Yordle trait built in, which is pretty cool. So if you're somebody who likes rerolls, consider Bard. A lot of people have given us really positive feedback on like that Bard game. There's also certain augments that will allow you to get to him early. So for example, if you get like Trade Sector, those free rerolls count, and you can use that to get to Bard. So pretty neat. All right, 3 cost. Ari, backline AP user, standard stuff, shoots her Foxfire's tails. It's like 30 mana, pretty cool. Draven, I love Draven. Draven is a big Ginsu's IE kind of attacker in the backline. Every couple assists, it's like I believe every 11 takedowns or 9 takedowns, he'll generate some gold, and if he gets kills, it counts as 2. So you want him to kind of be the primary carry, and it's only 1 gold at 1 star, but then it's like I think it's 2 gold at 2 star and like 4 gold at 3 star. So you kind of get that Draven celebration if he becomes a primary carry. And then just for playing him, you also will unlock Darius, as you'll see later. So they become like a pretty cool pair you could play together. Mundo is going to be a standard tank for Zaun. Gangplank is a melee user, drops those barrels, makes them go boom. Pretty good in Bilgewater, which we'll talk about later. Jinx. This is a really weird Jinx. This is not a very flexible Jinx, but it is a very powerful Jinx. You're going to want attack speed items. We find stuff like Ginsu's plus red buff, plus maybe Giant Slayer or something like that to be really good. Because the way it works is you have to do, I believe the number's 18 auto attacks. And before those 18 auto attacks have happened, she's pretty weak. She's actually not great. But once they do, she unlocks her full power and starts going crazy and shooting like crazy. And so attack speed's really good because it's not mana, so you can't cheat it with like Shojins or mana gen or anything. It must be attacks. And so having extra attack speed can make her go crazy pretty quick. All right, Leona. If you get a Leona out of a box, consider playing her early because she is the strongest tank at, early because she's a Targon unit, has no traits, so gets extra stats because of that. And then if you can get an early Leona 2 and itemize her, you'll unlock Diana, which is pretty cool to get that early. So one of my favorite things to do, actually, if you can pull this off, is Heroic Grab Bag on 2-1 with a Leona, Leona 2 on 2-1, 2 items, or get 3 items going, and then you've got a 4 cost really early, which is pretty cool. Loris, pretty standard tank, actually has an ability to taunt though. So once he taunts, he's going to take, extra aggro, but really good tank for Warden and Piltover, pairs really well with like Braum later. Malzahar, this Malzahar is weird. And it wasn't my idea to put Malzahar in the set, I swear. Originally he was cut. It got put back, but I'm glad. Malzahar summons 2 little minions, and they kind of act like a dot. They will be around for like 15-20 seconds. They last a long time, so you can get a lot of minions going. But unlike Malzahar from the last set, who like, oh, I've already dotted you, I'll dot the next person. This Malzahar has to go 1 by 1. So it'll be like, send my minions on the tank. More minions on the tank, more minions on the tank. And so you can be really good at like taking down like a big Scion, but it's not going to be like the Malzahar on live where like eventually the dot jumps to the back line and kills them. It's like, no, you got to go front to back with this Malzahar. Milio, if you get Milio out of a box, that's a good sign to consider playing Ixtal. He's the 3 cost in the Ixtal trait. Otherwise, pretty cool AP backline carry, kicks the soccer ball. You know how it is. Nautilus, good tank for Bilgewater. You love it. Sejuani, solid tank for Freljord and just general defender. Vayne is the inspiration here was sort of like those old League of Legends Vaynes tumbling around. Does some pretty good true damage, so you're going to want like a Ginsu's Deathblade kind of thing, but does some decent true damage. And then Zoe is a Targon unit. Again, kind of like the old Morgana threat here. She shoots 2 of her bubbles. Those bubbles are going to chill. So yes, there's another chill synergy if you want to play her with Anivia. But then also does some pretty solid damage, and I believe shreds. So some good utility on Zoe and just a solid threat. Not necessarily a primary carry, but, a good threat-like 3 cost. All right, and then 3 cost unlockables. Like I said, there's only 5 here. Darius, we already talked about, plays with Draven. Gwen is just the next step in Shadow Isles. Kennen you'll get pretty much by default if you're playing Ionia or Yordle or Defender. Kennen is like the set 1 reprint, the big AoE shock, pretty cool. LeBlanc, likely if you just played Noxus, you're probably going to find LeBlanc. Backline AP user, pretty cool. Now, Kobuko and Yumi is another example of a utility unit. Kobuko and Yumi, probably not the best primary tank in the game. Not bad by any means, but not the best. But the utility here is wild. Bruiser and 2 Bruisers really good, which we'll talk about later. Invoker, 2 Invokers really good, which we'll talk about later. And the way Kobuko and Yumi works is Kobuko has a heal, and then while Kobuko's alive, Yumi's doing his thing, or Yumi's doing her thing, where she'll jump back, give some attack speed, and heal somebody. But even when Kobuko dies, Yumi sticks around. And so like just having Kobuko on your board is a lot of general power, even when not itemized. And so again, if you're somebody who likes the old utility kind of units, this is a great example. And because we have 100 champions, we can do more of that, which is awesome. So Kobuko and Yumi, great utility. All right, now we get into the real meat of this set. And again, this set is meant to be a set where you're going to go 8, get some 4 costs, going to go 9, get some 5 costs, really build your end game boards. Now, again, that's not to say all reroll is dead or anything. There are still reroll lines, but we do expect most people to be playing standard traditional TFT. Let's talk about the 4 costs. Ambessa is a melee user that can get some resets. If you get her early, she's really strong because those resets, at least going day 1 on PBE, are full damage. She's only 20 mana, so it's not like they're huge casts or anything. But she can do some big damage. And if you can get a 2-star Ambessa to die, you'll unlock Mel, which is kind of cool. Belveth is another kind of 2-range unit, does a lot of stacking damage. So pretty powerful 2-range melee unit there. Braum, probably the best tank in the game. This dude's just really, really tanky. I think going to PBE, we're having 55% DR for 4 seconds. So this dude's a beast. Very, very good. All he really needs is 2 Warden to get going. Doesn't really even need Freljord. Garen feels like a little less tanky than Braum, but a little bit more utility with like the healing, better traits, stuff like that. But another tank. Lissandra, pretty standard backline, 4-cost AP caster. She'll freeze a target and then do some AoE that's split between everyone hit. So if you only hit one target, it's going to nuke them down. If you hit a big cluster, it's going to hit a bunch of them. Good stuff. Lux, this is a slightly different variation on the Lux. It's the laser Lux, but the way it works is she throws out her Q first. The Q hits 2 targets, and then the laser will hit those 2 targets really hard, and anyone else much softer. So she's really good at bursting down 2 targets, but isn't just the like backline corner snipe first cast. So a little healthier version of that Lux, which we like. Misfortune. This is not the ult Misfortune. The way this one works is she shoots the rain, and it'll hit like 3 targets. And she has a pretty low mana cost, so the more she casts, the more bullets that come down, it starts to ramp up. So you'll definitely want to run like a Shojin or a blue buff on her with like IE, get her going. Seraphine is the ult, the line that hits targets with some fall-off damage. Swain, interestingly enough, is our typical AoE CC 4-cost champion. Big circle, hits the board, stuns them all. And so it's pretty interesting to have an Arcanist Juggernaut have those traits. Taric. Taric is another utility unit here. Now, Taric is one side of the coin. You'll see the other side later. Taric is a Targon unit, so powerful, doesn't need traits. In addition, he passively gives your team MR. So if you liked Mystic back in the day, Taric is Mystic. You play Taric, 2-star Taric gives your team 20 MR. Cool. So he's a nice flexible tank unit there. Wukong, another standard tank, doesn't have a stun, but one thing he does have is when he dies, he leaves behind a clone with the same items. So if you're talking about high effective health pools, Wukong's really good. I really especially like a Wukong early if you find him like level 5. Not a lot of teams can deal with that much effective health. And then finally, Yunara, first time in TFT. She's a Ginsu's crit user. Her ult is that she like shoots this long line bolt that looks really cool. And it has fall off damage, but if it crits, it does extra true damage. So you're going to want that Ginsu's IE +1. But yeah, she's pretty cool. All right, then we come to the unlockable 4 costs, and you will notice there are more unlockable 4 costs than there are standard 4 costs. And so again, this is the glory of the unlock system, is that it provides a lot more endgame variety. All right, let's try to go through these quick. Diana, I talked about. You put 3 items on Leona, you unlock Diana. Diana is kind of like a Kali on live. One big difference, though, she doesn't drop aggro. She'll still jump around like crazy, and she has no traits, so she can't really scale up, but she has no aggro drop, so she should be a slightly healthier version, but she is still an assassin. Speaking of which, there are basically two main assassins in this set, Diana and Fizz. Now, I'm going to call it out now. If you like to annoy your opponents, Fizz is your guy. Fizz is our risk. And I think it's a risk, but we're taking it here. Fizz is an assassin. Fizz will jump very quickly to your carry and kill them quick if you do not position well. That's what he does. You'll unlock him by getting some Yordles and Bilgewater on your board. But yeah, he's scary. So if I expect one thing for players to complain about this set, it's Fizz. He's scary. All right, Kai'Sa. I love Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa is actually one of my favorite champions because she has Assimilator. And what that means is if you put AP items on her, she's like a Ginsu's AP person that stacks attack speed with AP damage. If you put AD items on her, she completely changes her spell and is shooting her missiles. So she's flexible in that it doesn't matter what items you have, you can consider Kai'Sa. Doesn't matter, AD or AP. Cool. And to unlock her, all you have to do is put 3 items on a long shot, any long shot. So, for example, a really common way is you put 3 items on Kog'Maw, you get to level 8, you unlock Kai'Sa, move the items from Kog'Maw to Kai'Sa. Easy. But you can get pretty clever too. Play AD items on a Caitlyn, unlock Kai'Sa later. Great. So, pretty cool. Kalista, again, she's the 4th step of Shadow Isles. You're pretty much only playing her in Shadow Isles. That's the way she works. I'm going to skip the Shurima unit. Actually, I can't. Okay, Nasus and Renekton are Shurima units, and we'll talk about Shurima later. But what you need to understand is both of these guys are powerful, and they're going to PBE really strong. So even though they have no traits, kind of like Targon, they have one trait, which is Shurima, and it's a doozy. These guys are beefy. So even though they say 4 costs, think of them like traitless 5 costs. These dudes are beast. All right, Nidalee. Nidalee is a... Oh, by the way, Nasus is a tank. Renekton's a melee damage dealer. All right, Nidalee. Nidalee's cool. She's part of Ixtal, and you'll unlock her by having 2 Nikos, 2 2-star Nikos. So you need at least 6 copies of Nico to unlock Nidalee. And Nidalee is like an AP Darius, you know, like the jump and reset, where it's like big damage, and if you kill, reset, jump to the next target. So AP... But the cool thing about Nidalee is as long as your strongest Nico is alive, she's untargetable. So if you want to go like 3-star Nidalee that's super tanky while Nidalee's running around killing people, you can do that. Or if you want to get really silly, slap your 2-cost Nico 2-star in the corner behind your 2 ranged units. You can do that too. We're planning for that. And Nidalee will be untargetable. So now once the Nico dies, she's fully targetable, pretty fragile. There you go. All right, Rift Herald. Rift Herald is very, very beefy. If you want a big ball of health, Rift Herald is your guy. Now, the way you get Rift Herald is you have Void active for 8 rounds. So if you, for example, can open up with like a Kog'Maw and Cho'Gath, play them from 2-1 to 3-3, you can unlock Kai'Sa or unlock Rift Herald on 3-5, and then play around that. And then you have to stay in Void. You could play around Bruiser and just have a really strong 4-cost early on. But just don't forget that if you're going to want a Rift Herald, you got to play Void for 8 rounds. Only 2 Void, but don't forget. Singed. If you guys like the old 5-cost Singed that ran around and left his poison trail, he's back. Good Morello user, pretty tanky. To unlock him, though, you have to have, I believe it's either like Juggernaut or Zaun active and lose 35 health. So if you're at 100 health, you won't be able to unlock Singed. He's a bit of a comeback thing here, but if you unlock him, pretty cool. All right, Skarner. Skarner is the other side of the Taric equation. If you place Skarner on your board, your team gets armor. So he's the armor buff for the team. So a 2-star Skarner gives your team 20 armor. Now, to unlock Skarner, it's really silly, but I'll call it out. You have to be level 7 and put a Gargoyle Stoneplate on a non-tank for 1 round. That's it. So, and you can do it on PBE. So a common tactic is like 3-7, move your Gargoyle to the carry, unlock him 4-1, move your gargoyle back, you're good to go. But Skarner, another flexible tank, pretty cool. Veigar. Veigar's a weird one. In order to unlock Veigar, you have to build 2 death caps, which is not common. So you're gonna have to go out of your way to unlock Veigar. But like we said, certain unlocks are harder to do. And if you do it, you'll be rewarded for it. And Veigar is pretty rewarding. His spell can inherently crit, so you don't need to build JG. And he scale, like AP is more efficient on him. So the best build for Veigar is like death cap, plus like a blue buff or a Shojin or something. And so then he'll go pretty crazy. He's also an Arcanist, which will scale that AP even more. So he's got that passive. So you can get like 400, 500 AP on your Veigar. If you ever get a Radiant death cap on Veigar, have fun. But yeah. Then we have Warwick. Warwick is interesting in that he's a melee user, kind of like the old 6-cost Warwick a little bit, obviously tuned down, but goes around swiping, enters a frenzy mode. But what's kind of cool is the way you unlock him is you have a 2-star Jinx and a 2-star Vi, and then you unlock him. And his spell will actually give any Jinx and Vi's on your board attack speed. So if you want to synergize that, you can. Kind of neat. Pretty common to play like Jinx plus Warwick plus 1 more for 3s on, and then build around that. But yeah. And then finally Yone. And as I mentioned, Yone is only unlocked with a 3-star Yasuo. But what's cool is Yone has this like AoE CC spell a little bit that knocks people up. And when it knocks people up, if your 3-star Yasuo will actually like dash to them and do damage. So the better items you have on Yasuo, your Yone spell will deal more damage. And that's a cool synergy you can run together. So, all right, then we have the 5 costs. Now there are 8 standard 5 costs. And one of the things I want to call out here is that pretty much every 5 cost here is designed to be very threat-like and not need their traits. So if you see any of these 5 costs on like level 7, our expectation is you're going to be like, oh crap, I got to put this in. And let me explain why. Annie is a backliner, and we'll talk about her spell in a second. But what's interesting is Dark Child. When you have Annie, you also have Tibbers. Now, you don't have to play Tibbers, but you can. Takes up another slot. So you can place Annie, that's 1 Arcanist. If you place Tibbers is a tank, that's 2 Arcanist. So Annie by herself gives 2 Arcanist, which is, I believe, 18 AP. It's a pretty chunky buff. And you basically have 2 5 costs for the price of 1. And Tibbers and Annie can both be itemized. This isn't like some weird summon. Like, Tibbers is a full unit. This dude's got a tanky spell. He attacks, he heals. And then Annie's spell is really weird. Annie's mana is like 200. And she builds up and she builds up. So you're going to want like a Shojin and a blue buff or something like that. But once she casts, she lights the board on fire. And now everyone is dotted for the rest. All the enemies are essentially burning, not the actual burn debuff, but like actual AP damage for the rest of combat. And then from there, her spell is like a 20 mana fireball, you know. But pretty cool if you have a solid front line, like a Tibbers, and then you can just melt the enemy team, backline included. So, all right, Azir. For those of you that remember the Azir that had the 2 dummies that would come in, or the 2 soldiers, it's that Azir. So you place him, and with Emperor, you have 2 target dummies, essentially, of extra health. So very high utility here. Disruptor's a good trait to run a 2-piece of. And then the big thing is Azir is the 1 piece you need to start playing Shurima. And we'll talk about Shurima later, but I promise you, if you ever get an early Azir, immediately put this in and start considering Shurima. Shurima is now open to you because the other 3 Shurimans are all unlockables, but Azir is not, and Azir is the one that starts the train. So good stuff there. Fiddlesticks, 2 range. His ult is, he builds up mana, and then his ult is jump in, AoE CC. But the thing to note here is he has a passive that lowers the enemy armor and MR by 10. So just passively, this guy is making your enemies weaker. So very valuable to just slot him in, even if you're not playing Vanquisher. Kindred can activate 2 Quick Striker, which is another really good 2-piece aura trait. And then in addition, does good damage, but this is the Kindred that will put down the AoE circle and protect units for 2.5 seconds. Very, very powerful, can really swing fights. So definitely consider Kindred if you've got one other Quick Striker or really just in general, and does decent damage herself. All right, Lucian and Senna. Basically, they come as one unit. So like when you buy it, it might start out as Senna. And they basically will rotate between their ults. So it'll be like Senna's on the board. She'll ult, which is her big like board-wide shield your team and do some damage. Which then switches to Lucian, builds up mana, and then Lucian does his and then they switch. And that's kind of their shtick, is that they'll switch. And that's what Soulbound does. In addition, they have a team aura. When Lucian is out, your team gains damage amp. When Senna is out, your team gains durability. And so again, just placing them on your board, even with 0 Gunslinger, powerful. Ornn. Ornn is back. Guess what he generates every 4 turns? If you guessed a random artifact, you're right. This Ornn is back. He can make artifacts. Now, one little twist, though, is that Ornn's stats are actually pretty bad. Like, if you look at him as a champion, they're not great. But if you put items on him, he gets a little bit more health per item. If you put artifacts on him, he gets a lot more health. So if you can put 3 artifacts on Ornn, all of a sudden you've got this like 7,000 HP god. So there's incentive to not just spread out your artifacts and ditch him, but actually keep them on Ornn. And a 2-star Ornn with like 1 or 2 artifacts, insanely tanky. So definitely try to pick him up if maybe you already have one and you want to build up to another. Pretty cool. Shyvana, if you've been playing the 7.5 revival, this Shyvana is pretty similar. Transforms into a dragon, lands, breathes fire, but the Dragonborn gives your team, it prevents 8% damage from enemy abilities. So again, just passive, really good stats for your team. Good stuff. Zilean. Zilean is another champion that can be kind of frustrating, because what he does is he throws out bombs on people, and those bombs start ticking, and they're doing some light damage. And every time he casts, he's building up Chrono Keeper. Chrono Keeper is building up XP. So the more you can get the Zilean to cast, you'll build up XP and actually speed up your leveling process if you want to get to like level 9, level 10. But here's the catch. When the bombs land on people after a certain amount of time, they will kill the target, right? So if that person has a 10,000 health Scion, Zilean is a great counter because tick, 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 boom. That Scion is gone. True damage, they're dead. So Zilean's a pretty good counter to any true tank. And if you can get him to spam cast with like Invoker, you'll build some XP. All right. And then we have the unlockable 5 costs. Now you might look at this and go, only 10? We're not done yet. Some of these are played within their traits. So one of the things we tried to do is that since the normal 5 costs aren't the capstone for some of the vertical traits, they live here. So for example, I'm going to do the vertical trait ones here first. Galio is one of my favorite. He was one of the first designs of the set. You can only unlock him by playing 7 Demacia and having 12 star levels of Demacia. Then you unlock Galio. But the way Galio works is you don't put him on the board. He sits on your bench and he adds Demacia to your thing. So he's basically +1 unit sitting on your bench, almost like a free Tactician's Crown. And then when your team takes a bit of damage, he jumps up and dives in like the old cultist Galio. So you actually get like a free +1 if you're playing vertical Demacia. So a cool thing you can do is like go 7 Demacia, unlock Galio, put Galio on your team, drop down to like 5 or 3 Demacia, keeping Galio, and then fill your board with other powerful units. Pretty cool. Set is the capstone of Ionia, but you don't really need to play Ionia to get him. All you have to do to unlock him is, I believe it's level 8. It might be level 7. I think it's level 8. And then put 1 unit by themselves in the front 2 rows for like, I think it's 1 round or 2 rounds, and you unlock Set. And this is the boss set. This is the one that, you know, takes some damage, runs back, does some sit-ups, and then comes back and slams people down. And if he can grab their big health Scion, can do some mega damage. So that set is back. Speaking of people who are back, Tahm Kench, my favorite unit of all time, is back, which is really cool to see. Now, the one thing is, you do have to be playing Bilgewater to get to him, because you have to have spent 500 Bilgewater tokens. But once you do, he's here. You can feed him, build up his attack speed or his AP or his health, get him chunky. The more you feed him, the bigger he gets. If he eats people, spits out items, spits out gold, all that good stuff. Tahm Kench is back, baby. T-Hex is the capstone for Piltover. If you've played, 5 Piltover or get some Piltover units in, you'll unlock T-Hex. T-Hex is a really powerful unit, and the cool thing is he'll gain extra stats based on who you put to pilot him. So he'll, for example, if you give him, I believe it's if you give him a caster, he'll gain more mana regen. If you give him a ranged unit, he gets more AD. I forget the exact things, but basically you put a unit in to pilot him, he gains stats. He has this big old laser. Good stuff. Thresh, Capstone of Shadow Isles. When you've captured 175 souls, you get Thresh. He is a carry. That's the crazy thing here. Thresh is a damage dealer. So you're going to want stuff like Crown Guard on him. He's tanky-ish, but he does some surprisingly good damage. Volibear is interesting. The way you unlock Volibear is you have a unit with, I believe, 3,800 health or more. And then he is a big damage dealer. But the big thing is he scales really well with health. So yes, you want to put like Sterix on him, but also even just like Warmogs or Bruiser and Freljord can make him go pretty crazy. And he does his big ult and does some extra damage there, which is cool. Ziggs, you got to get to level 9, but then he can capstone off either Zaun or Yordle. Throw some bombs, good stuff. We have Mel. Mel's not really the capstone of Noxus. You kind of play her independent of that. You can really just play her flexibly. But you need an Ambessa, a 2-star Ambessa to die. That'll unlock Mel. And then Mel's like a backline caster that you're going to want mana on, and then does a big AoE boom. And if you can get her to cast enough, and it's really hard, you're not going to see this many games, but basically what she does is she puts these orbs on the board, and these orbs will slowly drain a little bit of mana. And if you drain, I think it's 175 mana over the course of a game, she'll give you a Radiant item. Now, that's really hard to do. I think we've only done it once in playtest, but kind of a fun little chase she has. Aatrox. Aatrox is unlocked by having a champion with, I think it's 40% Omnivamp and being level 8. This dude's just a flexible demon. Does a lot of damage, even unitemized. And then the fact that he has a second health bar is wild, because when he dies, he comes back. So this dude's just a beast. If you build like an early Bloodthirster, very, very good to consider an Aatrox. And then Xerath, who is the fourth piece of Shurima. He's the hardest to unlock of the Shurimans, but if you can get him, one of the cool things he has is Ascendant. And for those of you who played set 12, this Xerath, he unlocks charms. If you put this Xerath on your board every turn, you're going to get a Xerath charm, which is kind of neat. So if you find an early Azir can unlock Xerath quick, you can get those charms going, which is pretty cool. All right. Now, like I said, this isn't everything, though. There's still a little bit more to go. We have our 7-cost champions. Now, before you ask, let's talk about it right away. A 7-cost is just a 5-cost, okay? They operate like 5-costs. They have the same rules as 5-costs, the same shop odds as 5-costs. The only thing that makes them 7-cost is that they cost more gold, and this is us signaling to you that they're more powerful. These are very powerful champions, or at least they have the potential to be powerful. So be aware of that. But otherwise, for all intents and purposes, they are 5-costs, okay? That's it. So one question you're going to ask, for example, is if I unlock Aurelion Soul and then I use Pandora's Bench, can I roll a zillion into Aurelion Soul? Yes, because they're just 5-costs, okay? So other than the fact they cost 2 more gold, they're just 5-costs. Now, what do these champions do? These are pretty crazy. First off, we have Aurelion Soul. Now, remember how I said Targon is threats? Well, if you can play all the Targon units, which means you have to get the Leona 2, put the items on her, unlock the Diana, and then find the Taric, and that's the hard, plus the Zoe and the Aphelios, you can unlock Aurelion Soul. Once you unlock Aurelion Soul, he starts off pretty weak, okay? He's actually not, like, he's not someone that, like, you get on your board and you're like, oh my god, I win the game. He's not that, he's not weak, but he's not insane, okay? But the way he works is every time he damages a unit with a spell, he starts gaining some star power. And the more Targon units you keep on the board, because playing a 6 Targon board is not optimal. You're like, as soon as you unlock Aurelion Soul, you really want to start like getting Defender in and getting Bruiser in and getting traits in. But if you can keep the Targon in, you're going to get more star power quicker. As he gains more star power, his spell gets pretty insane. He'll start doing like utility and knockups and bigger AoEs and true damage and burn. It's like, it gets pretty nuts. And then, so like, I think it's like 600, you kind of fully unlock the spell, and he's kind of a beast. If you can somehow get to, I believe the number's 1199, which requires a pretty early Aurelion Soul unlock and staying 6 Targon, then his spell will instantly wipe the enemy team. Like, it's pretty hard to do, but he can be a like 3-star 5-cost levels of power by himself, even as a 2-star or even 1-star, if you can get all that star power. So he can go pretty crazy. Baron is the capstone of Void. You have to be level 10. You have to play 7 Void units, which is all of them. And then when you do, you unlock Baron. Baron takes up 2 slots, which means you then unlock 9 Void, which is powerful. And Baron's just an insane beast, right? Like, you're level 10, you've got this Baron. He has like 3,000 base health, does tons of damage. He's not a tank. He's an AD damage dealer, so you're going to want things like BT, IE, Sterix on him. And dude just does insane stuff. I won't spoil it for you, but Baron's cool. Brock. Brock is the capstone of Ixtal. Now, Ixtal is our high-risk trait, and we'll talk about that later. But as you play the high-risk trait, you'll start earning these little tokens as you level up. And once you earn 500, you unlock Brock. Brock is just a big, healthy beast AD user. And the big thing he can do is your first Brock cast is a big board-wide stun. So this guy's powerful. His auto attacks are like, I think he has like 300 base AD, and they AoE cleave. So dude's a beast. But yeah, you have to play the high-risk trait to unlock him. All right, Rise. Rise is really one of the more fun ones. I believe during one of our influencer tests, someone spent like their entire first game not just playing, they just were theory crafting Rise boards. Because the way Rise works is to unlock him, you have to have 4 region origins active. So this isn't classes, but for example, if you have Yordle plus Targon plus Noxus plus Demacia, if you have all those traits active, you'll unlock Rise. Great. Now Rise by himself, standard spell, pretty low mana, shoots a bolt, whatever. But every region you have active adds something to that spell. So the more regions you can have active, the better his spell becomes. For example, if you have like Shurima active, his spell can do a little knock up and start to dig for gold. If you have Targon active, I believe the spell heals. It might be Yordle, I have that backwards, but the more things you have active, the better his spell becomes. And so he's also really good with emblems. If you have a lot of emblems, you can get more regions active, you can get your Rise spell going crazy, and that's really fun to do. All right, Silas. Silas is fun. The way you get Silas is you have a 2-star Jarvan, a 2-star Garen, and a 2-star Lux. So you're probably leaning Demacia, but not necessarily. Could just be like Defender Arcanist. And then you sell them. When you sell a 2-star Jarvan, a 2-star Lux, and a 2-star Garen, it doesn't have to all be on the same turn. Like, you could sell the Jarvan early and then whatever. But once you sell them all, you unlock Silas. And Silas is a very well-statted, you know, this guy's got more stats than usual for a 5-cost. He's an Arcanist Defender, cool. His spells, though, he will actually cycle, not like in a row. He'll do whatever he thinks is best. But between Lux's spell, the laser, and he'll shield himself. Jarvan's spell, he'll jump in, he'll do the AoE like Cataclysm CC thing. Or Garen's spell, he'll Judgment down and like kill somebody. So it's pretty cool. You got rid of the Demacians, he stole all their spells, and he's going to cycle between them. Pretty cool. And then lastly, we have Zaheen. I'm always going to mispronounce this. This one's weird because you can only unlock it with Xin Zhao's Hero Augment. So this will be a 2-1 Xin Zhao Hero Augment that when you complete, you will get Zaheen. Very thematic given what's going on in League of Legends. And yeah, the dude's kind of a beast once you do, but you have to, it's going to be a narrow thing. You're not going to be able to play him every game. He's kind of a Hero Augment. So, all right, there you go. There's 100 champions, but we are just getting started. Now let's talk about traits. All right, Bilgewater. Bilgewater's one of our really cool new ones here. Once you unlock Bilgewater, you have 3 Bilgewater in, you unlock the Bilgewater shop. And there's this little button here that says 0 that shows how many silver serpents you have. And if you press it, you can open the shop. And you can see here the shop has a Twisted Fate for 30, an Alawi for 15, 4 AD and AP for 15, and your first one's always free, which will give you, I believe, 20 AD and AP. And so as you play Bilgewater, you will earn Silver Serpents, and you can use those Silver Serpents to buy things. Pretty cool. The 3-piece mostly used to buy copies of champions. Like a common thing you could do would be like play the 3-piece with Gangplank, and then buy every copy of Gangplank you see in the shop, 3-star your Gangplank, then drop out of Bilgewater and move on to Vanquisher and Slayer, stuff like that. Or, you know, you can do lots of cool things like that. Once you unlock the 5 and 7-piece, there'll be these cool Bilgewater specific items that will appear in your shop. You can buy those. The price goes up each time you buy one, and you can put those on your champions. They have to go on Bilgewater champions. You can buy stats, but the cool thing is the stats don't go down if you like shrink the trait. So you can, for example, go to 7, buy a bunch of stuff, then drop to 5, right? Cut the Alawi, cut the Twisted Fate, put in some 5 costs, and play like 5 Bilgewater for the rest of the game. But it's really fun to see all the different things you can buy in the shop. I also like this just because, like I said, a common thing I'll do is use it to 3-star Gangplank or Nautilus. Yeah, so Bilgewater's pretty fun. Cool new UI. I like this trait. Very creative. Here's some of the items you can get. The Lucky Doubloon and the Captain's Brew. You have to have 5 Bilgewater in for you to see them in the shop. And then the other items, this isn't all of them, by the way. This is 5 of 8 of them. I think there's 8 of them total. Those will appear in the shop at 7 Bilgewater. So they're a little more than a full item's worth of power, but only by a little. They're like less than an artifact of power, but kind of cool items. Check them out here. You can pause the video if you want to see them. The Lucky Doubloon, if you can get that going early, obviously pretty cool. So, yeah. All right, next up we have Demacia. Demacia is pretty straightforward. Every time your team loses 25% health, and you can heal through this, so it doesn't literally have to be low. But your Demacians will rally, which will reduce their mana cost by 10%, all the way down 30%. It stops at 3 times. And then they have a base armor and MR as well. So 3-piece Demacia, for example, will give your Garen, although I think we've nerfed it since then, it might be 12 armor and MR now, and then 30% mana reduction, which is pretty solid. But really the big thing of Demacia is like, if you're going to play it vertical, you get the Galio, and like that's the big twist. And the 7-piece, that rally will also deal some true damage, but pretty easy to play vertical. Freljord. Freljord's going to be played a lot. We think 3 Freljord is one of the better flex traits here. Kind of reminds you of Strategist a little, but basically at 3 Freljord, you get these towers here, and you'll notice the coloring of the tower. If it's in the blue section, the light blue, colorblind here, sorry, but the top section, they're going to get health. So any unit you put in those 4 hexes are going to gain 8% health. And any unit you put in the 5 purple hexes are going to gain 10% damage amp. But if they're Freljord, they get 150% more. So for example, if you have a Lysandra in the back here at 3, that's going to be 25% damage amp. At 5, that's going to be 40% damage amp. So pretty good. And at 5, you also get a second tower. And then at 7, when those towers die, they also stun enemies for 1.5 seconds. But we find that the 3-piece especially is very valuable, just to give your team that extra damage amp, that extra health. So, good stuff. All right, Ionia. Ionia is different in that every game, there's a different path. So it's one of those things. Now, we don't have a little nub that you can check at the start of every game. I'm sorry. I know that's going to bother some people. But every game, it's one of 5 Ionia paths. And you can check which one it is. And they're each meant to highlight something different. So we have Path of Spirits. Now, the way Path of Spirits works is basically every time any Ionian casts, they all gain AD and AP. So if you're playing someone with a low mana cost, like Ahri and Yasuo, who both have 30, this is very good, right? You'll stack this up pretty quick. Not to mention you also have the health from it. Cool. Path of Blades. This is for someone like Jhin or Yunara, where basically it's like it's the old Blade Master, right? Where they have a chance to trigger an extra attack, and those extra attacks deal bonus physical damage. So, cool. Path of Transcendent. This is one that basically says, hey, reroll. This is a great one to play with reroll Yasuo into the Yone. Also reroll Jhin if you want to even consider it. Not that I think that's good, but mostly reroll Yasuo here. But basically they'll gain bonus health and deal bonus magic damage, and 3-star Ionians gain more. So again, very good with Yasuo. Path of Enlightened. This is one that's basically saying, hey, try to fast 9 here, because you'll gain XP, and then you'll also gain more stats the higher level you are. So really, if you can get to 10 quickly, this will be a pretty powerful trait. And then finally, we have Path of the Prosperous, which will give you a gold every 3 takedowns. And then as you earn those gold, your stats will get better. So, you know, the 7-piece looks really weak at 35%, but if you've gained 50 gold, well, actually it's going to double, you know, so pretty cool. It's a little bit of like a mix of mutant and whatever, but Ionia is going to be different every game. Okay, Ixtal. This is our high-risk trait of the set, and I love this trait, but we've made a couple things that are pretty different from what you're used to. The first one is it's pretty small by comparison, right? Like, it's really just Kiana, Nico, and Milio, and then you can unlock a few champions, but really those 3 say time to play. The 5-piece trait is just going to give you some health. If you can get the 7-piece, which is pretty hard, it's basically keep winning and gain bonus stuff, you know. But realistically, it's a 3-piece trait. Now, the way it works, though, is when you put the 3-piece in, you're going to be offered some quests. You can see here, one says, have an empty bench for 4 rounds. That's easy. You can do that. Reroll the shot 5 times. That one's a little harder to do in the early game, but it's still doable. And then lose 4 rounds. That's your typical loss streak kind of thing. You'll do those. You'll earn these points and go from there and try to get bigger and bigger cash outs. Now, 500 unlocks Brock, which is pretty good. That's where the good rewards start coming in. 1,000 is the like game-winning rewards, you know, the stuff that'll instantly win the game. But one other thing to call out here is there's a bunch of different quests, so you'll want to try it out. We've kept the cash out tables simple. So when you start seeing these cash out tables data mined and whatever, you're going to see them a lot simpler than past cash out traits. We think a lot of the past cash out traits was like, what do I do with all these emblems? Or this crazy champion I didn't want any of. We didn't do that this time. It's really just like, here's some items that you're going to like. Here's some gold that you're going to like. It's fine. So give us feedback, though. We want to make sure this is like pretty easy to play. And this is definitely one of those cash out traits that's like, if you can play the 3-piece, do it. Do well. And then pivot and win or do something from there, you know? So I think we're launching it on PBE a little strong, and I certainly expect high elo to be like, oh, this is really good. But we want to let you play with it a bit first. So, but pretty cool new attempt. And like I said, some of the quests are pretty fun. There's also some really crazy high risk ones at the end. I'll give you an example. There's one that says like, win 2 combats with exactly 1 unit left, which is really hard to do, but the payout's like 400 points, you know? And that being said, I will call out, like, let's say you get to 400 points and then you pick a hard mission and you can't do it, you can't cash out. So make sure you pick a mission that you're confident you can do, because it is possible to lock yourself out of cashing out. That's the risk. That's the high risk part. So, all right. More origins. Noxus, pretty simple. This is our summon trait. You summon Otacon. I should know his name better, but the new summon, the crazy Noxus guy, he's there. Summon trait, pretty simple. Piltover. Piltover's pretty cool. The 2-piece is like the best support trait we've ever printed. The way it works is when you put the 2-piece in, you're going to be presented with an armory of 3 choices. And whatever you pick, kind of like the old Tempest trait, after 8 seconds, this will proc. After 8 seconds, your invention fires and you get this benefit. So let me give you some examples. An example of a 2-piece might be your team gains 22% attack speed, or stun the three enemy units who dealt the most damage for 1.5 seconds, right? You get to pick. And the 2-piece ones are always very good team benefit ones. So 2 Piltover, very good for the team. The 4 and the 6-piece work similarly. You'll pick a new effect and it'll trigger at 8 seconds. But the 4 and the 6 always say for your Piltover units, okay? So if you are planning to go vertical Piltover, 4 and 6, obviously good, but 2 is the flex one, so. All right, Shadow Isles. Like I said, this is pretty much a you play it or you don't kind of trait. This isn't a splash trait. It's a 5-piece vertical. You get the Viego, you start building up souls, they unlock more champions, and the more souls you have, the more powerful your champions are. It's pretty much that simple. You could compare it to something like Battle Academia, except instead of it being a set number, it's you're earning souls. Now, one thing to note, though, that if the absolute cap of your game, you actually want to drop out of Shadow Isles. So, like, you play 5 Shadow Isles, gather as much souls as you can, and then maybe ditch the Viego and ditch the Gwen so that you can put in some more 5 costs is going to be a common play, because you'll notice the trait itself doesn't actually give that much stats and only affects your soul acquisition. So if you've already gathered 300 souls, there's no need to stay at 5. So definitely consider that. And then we have Targon. Like I said, Targon are traitless but stronger than average champions. They're kind of our threats. So Void. Void is pretty straightforward. You play 2, 4, 6. Each one you play, 2 or 4 or 6, will give you a mutation. You can see which 3 you're going to get at the top of the trait here, and there are 6 total. Stuff like Iron Carapace is a tank one. Stuff like Spitter Spines is a good damage dealing one. After dealing 1,000 damage, fire spikes at the 2 nearest enemies for 111 physical damage. So gain some attack speed, do some damage, good stuff. Yeah, pretty simple. And then if you can get to 9, that's where you're going to get stuff like the Baron, and your mutations will get even better. And yeah, so good stuff. Yordle. Yordle is probably one of the more fun traits this set. There are 10 Yordles, so a lot of Yordles. And I know your first gut is to go, well, Yordle's a reroll trait, right? Not really. You can, and that's the joy of this Yordle, is you can play this Yordle a lot of different ways. I personally prefer the like fast 8 version so that you can get those Yordle grab bags quick. But there is a reroll version component here. And so basically the way Yordle works is they're going to gain 50 health and 7% attack speed for each Yordle fielded. So if you're playing 4 Yordle, that's 200 health, 28% attack speed. If you 3-star Yordles, that's going to go up. Cool. So there's the reroll component, but you don't have to. Now, if you play 4-piece, your first shop slot will always have a Yordle in it. You have to buy it still, so this isn't drip econ like the old Yordle in the day, but it is guaranteed copies of things that you need. So if you want to keep racking up those Yordles, great. If you play 6-piece, you're going to get 2 free rerolls a turn. And so this is where like there's a common version where you could stay at like level 6, level 7, and use those rerolls to try to 3-star a bunch of Yordles, play around Teemo carry, pretty common thing you could do. And then 8, you start getting Yordle grab bags. And these Yordle grab bags can have like 7 gold in them, 2 3-star Yordles, item components. So this trait can get pretty crazy if you're ahead of the curve. So yeah, Yordle's pretty fun. I'm interested to see how everyone ends up playing it. A lot of unlocks though. You'll notice of the 10 Yordles, 6 of them are unlocks. So kind of requires you to unlock things. Zon, pretty straightforward trait here. At 3-piece, basically they have this buff, this like shimmer fused buff that's going to give them 10% durability and 90% attack speed for 4 seconds that comes off and on. And at the 3-piece, it's like off and on and off and on. And at the 5-piece, they also gain some extra health that'll heal them up. And then at the 7-piece, they both go crazy. So just a pretty standard, like, keep you getting that shimmer bonus kind of fun stuff. Okay, then we get to Shurima. Now, I told you I would talk about Shurima. Sorry, this is long. Shurima, like I said, you get Azir, you put it in, and now you start this quest, okay? You need to unlock Nasus or Renekton or Xerath. You get Nasus for losing 2 combats in a row with Azir, Renekton for winning 2 combats in a row with Azir, or Xerath for alternating between win-lose for 3, okay? So let's say the very first thing you do is you unlock Renekton. Now you have 2 Shurima, great, and you can get 20% max health, cool. But what that does is it makes the other 2 harder. So for example, after unlocking Renekton, Nasus will now say lose 3 combats in a row. So now maybe let's say you unlock Xerath, who will say alternate between winning and losing for 4 combats. You unlock Xerath, you put him in. Now your Shurima units have 50 armor and MR, cool. And now Nasus will say lose 4 combats in a row. So again, each quest gets a little harder, but if you can do all of them, you will get 4 Shurima, and this is basically a prismatic condition, because at 4 Shurima, a Shurima will ascend to godhood, which basically means 3-star, every 3 seconds. And so Azir and Xerath will go 3-star, they'll have a 3-star 5 cost, you'll win the game. But again, it does this all, so if you can get an early Azir, start considering this line, right? Like this is something you gotta do. And probably don't want to save Nasus for last, because losing 4 in a row late game is hard, right? And so like there's a whole component to here that's really fun. But like Nasus and Renekton are just inherently powerful champions, so you can play around those. But Shurima's this really cool late game pivot option that's really fun. All right, then we have classes. Now, the thing with classes is you're not going to see anything revolutionary here. But the one thing to note is pay attention to all the two pieces. A lot of the two pieces are very valuable, okay? So like 2 Arcanist here, 18 AP for team, 25 for Arcanist. A 2-piece 18 AP splash, pretty good. Other than that, it's AP that scales. Bruiser, you'll notice the team gains 150 max health. This is more than normal. Last set, I think it was 120. Originally, it was 100. So that's more valuable this set. Otherwise, it's Bruiser. Defender, your team gains 12 armor and MR. Normally, it was 10. Other than that, it's Defender. Pretty straightforward. Disruptor. This is important because Disruptor's abilities dazzle enemies hit. Dazzle is a keyword we don't use that often, but basically it says reduce enemy damage dealt by 10%. So 2 Disruptor on your team, like especially like throwing an Azir or a Mel, will make your enemies do less damage, which is good. So having 2 Disruptors is really valuable. Gunslinger. This one's just bonus AD and bonus damage every 4th attack. Nothing crazy there. Invoker, the 2-piece is going to give your team 1 mana regen. And then Invokers. Now, this is a little unintuitive, but I want to explain this to you. Invokers gain more mana from sources. Now, unlike Invokers in the last set, which meant, well, they had mana regen, so you didn't need mana items. This is, they synergize better with mana items. So if you have Invoker, you're probably going to want stuff like Blue Buff, Shojin, Adaptive Helm, that's kind of thing. So it's a little bit different than past Invoker. Keep that in mind. Juggernaut, pretty much the same as live, although the 6-piece has been nerfed. The other Juggernauts heal for less. The vertical is not meant to be quite as good here, but otherwise should be solid. Long Shot is your pretty typical sniper thing here. Do more damage the further away they are. 2, 3, 4, 5. Quick Striker, this is another really valuable 2-piece. Your team gains 15% attack speed. That's great. And then they gain more based on their target's missing health. Slayer, they gain Omnivamp and attack damage. And the attack damage goes up if they get lower in health. Vanquisher is your typical, now they can crit without IE. And then they also gain crit. And then Warden, I believe these numbers got nerfed since then. But basically, they gain a shield when they get at 75 and 25% health. So tanky shield stuff. Good stuff. Finally, one last class to talk about here is Darkin. Now, Darkin is on Aatrox and Zaheen, and you'll notice it's a 1, 2, 3. But there's one other twist here. Later, you're going to see some artifacts that are Darkin items. Those Darkin artifacts give the Darkin trait. So it's pretty cool that you could take like Aatrox plus a Darkin item and get the 2-piece here. And the 2-piece Darkin is nice because it says, and you heal for 25% of the player damage you deal. So there's a whole component here if you want to try to get a Darkin trait going, which is kind of fun. So, all right, we did champs, we did traits. Still so much to go. Oh, one more thing on traits. Prismatics. Now, last set, we tried this whole quest thing. This set, we're going back to emblems, and hold with me. Trust, I know some of you are already going Wandering Trainer. Just bear with me here. Okay. The first thing to note here is all of these require 2 or 3 emblems. I'm actually a little worried about Demacia, but 2 or 3 emblems and level 10. Okay. And trust me, they do require level 10. You'll see why later. But Bilgewater, Demacia, and Noxus are our 3 old style standard prismatic traits. Get lots of emblems, reach level 10. They do crazy stuff. Good stuff. In addition, Ionia and Yordle are kind of like Mech from the last set, where on 3-2, it's only 3-2 this time, not 2-1. If you have the trait active, you can unlock an augment that will unlock their 10-piece bonus. Now, because Yordle and Ionia actually have 10 champions, you don't even need an emblem, right? So it's like, play Ionia, walk the true path, and then if you get to Ionia 10, you get this new upgrade. And so same with Yordle here. So these are special augments. You can get them on 3-2, unlock the 10-piece, make it to level 10. Those are prismatic. So we have both styles here. They all require level 10. They both require some hoops, but hopefully they'll be exciting and worth the payoff. All right, now we get down to the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about system changes. First off, player damage in stage 3 is going up, but down in stage 4. In addition, the cost to go level 8 is going up, the cost to go level 9 is going down, and the cost to go level 10 is going down. And then to final here, the shop odds at level 8, this is big. 4 cost goes from 24% to 30%. This is a massive swing to make level 8 more reliable. And then at level 9, 5 costs go from 12% to 15%. So all of this together does one thing, which is we're trying to lengthen the mid game a little, just a little, and make stage 3 matter a bit more, so that if you just like open Lost Streak through stage 3, it's going to hurt more, and you're going to have to like play a longer board here. If you try to, you'll still be able to go 8 on like 4-1, 4-2 sometimes with econ augments and stuff like that, but it'll cost a little more. But when you get there, it's far more reliable. So it's like, okay, I played well, I got through the early game, it's 4-2 or 4-5, time to go level 8 and do my roll down. It'll be a more consistent roll down. We want to reward you for getting there and make sure that you can hit. And so that's what this does. And then if you're a level 8, you've built your board, and it's like, now do I want to go 9 or 10? It should actually be a real conversation. Like, there are real decisions here because 9 and 10 are going to be easier to do. Do I want to go 9 and 10, get those better odds, get those better units, those powerful 5 costs, and they are powerful. And again, we expect the best boards in this set to be level 9 boards with mixes of 4s and 5 costs. So, and then finally, the carousel, we're going to increase the odds of spatulas and pans a little bit. You'll see why. It has to do with augments. But we want to make sure that spats and pans are actually achievable sometimes, especially for our players who don't play 500 games. And so you will see them a little bit more. Okay, opening encounters. Let's talk about this. 4 opening encounters. This is the list, and it's generally what I would call a pretty low impact list. A lot of these are like pretty safe things, right? Golden Gala, 3 cost start, 2 cost start, component anvils, nothing too crazy. We still have some of the stuff like Scuttle Puddle is here, but you'll notice Crab Rave is gone. Loot subscription's still here, cool. Gold subscription's still here. There's some new ones like Howling Abyss, but that's just gain 5 random 1 costs. That's nothing wild. You have stuff like Scouting Party, which is gain an extra augment reroll. Cool. So again, most of these are pretty low impact. Obviously, the big news here, though, that everyone's going to be talking about is you will notice there is no Wandering Trainer, but there is a new one called Emblem Ensemble. We want to try this. We think this will be healthier, but we want to try it, and if we're wrong, we'll pivot. Rise grants you 3 random emblems. Now, the reason we're doing this is so that you don't get the free +1 from the dummy, so that if you want to hit a Prismatic, you still have to go to level 10, right? Like if I get a Demacia emblem from this, I still got to work my way to level 10. And it's more interesting to like figure out who to put the emblems on, and that's kind of fun. And you can reforge them, right? Which will open up some interesting plays if you drop a reforger. So we think this will be a more interesting version of the Wandering Trainer while still keeping the spirit. But again, keep us honest. We know some of you are already like, and that's fine. Give it a try. If we're wrong, we're willing to talk about it, because I know, especially for competitive players, this has been a pain point. This is our attempt to try to ease our way into it. Let us know. But again, these are the encounters. Overall, though, this should be pretty low risk. All right, item updates. Generally, so a lot of the work you're going to see from here on out is a lot of like, we wanted to make sure this set really landed in a great spot, so we just did a pass on everything that's still left in the game, starting with items. Now, core items, we just wanted to make sure everything was exciting and worth building. So like Adaptive Helm was kind of just underperforming a little bit, so upped it a bit. Bramble Vest, we were finding this set was way too hard countery. We have a lot of auto-attacking champions this set, stuff like Unara and Jinx, and Bramble was really hard counter to them. So we actually shifted some of the power out of the auto reduction and into the HP. We're not trying to nerf the item, just make it less hard counter. Even Shroud, little weak. Giant Slayer, a little strong. Kraken's Fury, a little strong. Spear of Shojin, just making sure it's still good on AP champions as well as AD, so it's making those numbers equal. And then Warmogs, this is meant to be a bit of a neutral thing, but we have a lot of percent HP effects in the set, like Freljord and Bruiser, that the flat health was really benefiting from. So this was to kind of level that off and make it not quite as good with the Freljord and stuff like that. All right, Radiant items. Now, this is a big one, and I'm not going to go over all these changes because they all basically boil down to one thing. We're doing a hard reset on Radiant items. I want you to forget what you knew about Radiant items. All Radiant items that can be are now exactly like you had 2 of the base item, right? So if you have a Warmogs, Radiant Warmogs is the same as having 2 Warmogs. That's it. So every single thing here is just a patch note to get it to be that, right? And so there's no weird hooks, right? Like, for example, Radiant Gargoyle Stoneplate used to have health regen. Gone. Just gone. Now, the exceptions here are IE, JG, Last Whisper, Void Staff, Edge of Night, and Thieves Gloves. Things that we can't really double. And so they were generally balanced accordingly. They still kind of fit that same paradigm of more powerful versions of themselves, but simple. But everything else here is, like I said, just exactly 2 of the item. We're going to do this. We're going to see how they land and use this to balance from there. But we wanted to sort of simplify the system and get back to that clean version, which is if you have a Deathblade on you, you know that that's exactly 2 Deathblades worth of value. And this should also help us understanding where the base item is. Because if like the Radiant item's weak, it's possible the base item's weak, and we need to figure that out. But yeah, so all of these patch notes are basically that. Yeah, so I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to read them all. Here they are on screen. You can pause if you really want to look at all these. But again, that's really all they are. So like Ionic Spark is a really good example here, right? Where it's like the shock range used to be 3 instead of 2. Well, that's not what 2 Ionic Sparks would do. 2 Ionic Sparks would keep the same range and just do more damage. So it's shock range 2, no HP regeneration, right? Like I said, everything is just double the base. That's it. So, and there's some more. Warmog's armor here, remove the health generation. Yeah, so cool. All right, artifacts. Artifacts we know have been a pain point for a little bit. And so we're taking a pass on artifacts. You're going to see we removed some, added some, changed some. But the goal here, and I'll talk about this in a different video, but the goal here is that artifacts are meant to be about 1 to 1.5 times the power of a normal item, and certainly less than a Radiant item. So if they're ever better than a Radiant item on somebody, we've screwed up, okay? Now, the items we got rid of for this set for various reasons: Innervating Locket, Unending Despair, Deathfire Grasp, Monazane, Spectral Cutlass, and Trickster's Glass. Like I said, there's a bunch of reasons we got rid of these, but overall, these are the ones we weren't happy with in the set. They're gone. The new ones. First up, we have the 4 Darkened ones, like I told you. Darkened Bow, Darkened Aegis, Darkened Scythe, Darkened Staff. These all provide the Darkened trait, which is pretty cool. And then they each provide some stats and a unique effect. The bow is going to say every 10 attacks, shoot a big like Varus style bow that does some physical damage reduced by each enemy hit. Darkened Scythe is like every 4 seconds you get this bonus physical attack that's like an AoE. And then on takedown you get more. Darkened Aegis is going to be a heal. Every second heal the holder's max health and deal damage. And then when enemies die, you gain more. Darkened Staff, shoot spells. Every 20 mana spent, launch a tendril that does some bonus damage. Good stuff. All right, Void Gauntlet. This is a neat one. You gain some health and DR. And then combat start, you store 25% of your max health. And basically this is Living Bomb, right? It's like stay alive a long time, have high health. On death, take your health and go boom. So the longer you live, the bigger the boom. Pretty cool. Now, this one is, by the way, unique. We are not going to let you make triple bombs, but that may change. I don't really like that it's unique, but it's there. Hellfire Hatchet. Pretty standard damage dealing item. Attacks deal 2% of the holder's max health. So if you have high health, this is really good. For every 1% missing health, gain attack speed. So if you're someone who gets your health low, this is pretty good. Kappa Juice. Did you like Hat Trick from the last set? It's back. We think it's fun. So here's an artifact that if you can get it on 2-1, get a hat on takedown, on death, lose 20% of your hats. It's fun. We liked it. Keep it around. Shadow Puppet. This is spawn a clone that copies the holder's items. The clone has 70% max health and deals 40% damage. This is Shadow Clone. We're going to keep a close eye on this one, but want to try it. Aegis of Dawn and Dusk. So what these are, by the way, is just like artifact versions of Bramble Vest and Dragonclaw. High amounts of armor, high amounts of MR. They're kind of swapped though. The Aegis of Dusk is the one that deals damage. the Aegis of Dawn is the one that heals you. And they'll also steal armor and MR from enemies. And what's cool is if you have both, they'll trigger twice as fast. So there's this fun little chase. It's not like crazy powerful or anything, but it's a little stronger. If you can have Aegis of Dawn and Dusk, you can pull that off. That's kind of neat. Finally, we have Eternal Pact. This is, it's kind of a weak item by itself. And what it does, though, is you form a pact with your highest health ally. And then if the ally dies, you gain 10 mana regen and 40 AP. You go crazy. There's probably some weird stuff here that I'm a little nervous of like, you have your main tank with low health and an off tank with high health, and you get them killed so that you get this big powerful effect, but just calling it out. But while they're alive, when you use your ability, gain 6 mana, and then you shield them. So generally it's just like, if you have an AP user and you want to keep your tank alive, good stuff. And then maybe you can swing a fight at the end. All right, and then we have artifact adjustments. And again, a lot of this is mostly nerfs. You might see some light buffs to some of the artifacts that have been underperforming. But basically, we're trying to hold to that framework of like 1 to 1.5 items of value and balance accordingly. So stuff like Blighted Jewel is just not going to shred as fast and has a built-in thing to prevent it from going too crazy on the same enemy. So this is especially with Malzahar. Malzahar Blighted Jewel is going to be a big problem. So Dawn Core, a little less AD and AP. Death Defiance, just slightly adjusted. Again, I'm not going to read these all to you, but you can kind of see it. I think one of the ones worth calling out here is Mittens. Mittens went from durability, which wasn't really something that a lot of our damage dealers wanted, to damage amp, which is something they wanted, and chill and burn and wound immunity. So if you have someone like Aatrox, who's got like BT and a lot of vamp, Mittens is a great third item. So consider that. Here's some more. Again, mostly adjustments. Biggest ones to call out here, Sniper's Focus no longer gives bonus range, so it's not +1 range. And basically you deal 40% damage amp against targets 4 or more hexes away. So this is good on someone who can like just nuke the backline, right? So like Aurelion Soul, for example, whose spell can hit the whole board. Well, that means hitting people who are farther than 4 hexes away, do some good damage. Seeker's Arm Guard now gets some Omnivamp, so it makes it better for a lot of those melee damage dealers that want that. Flicker Blades gets a big kick in the teeth, making sure that item's not too insane. Yeah. All right, finally, one more section. We're almost done. Time for augments. Now, augments, shout outs to Kent, by the way, who led the initiative here. But as we built this set, we're like, this is a really good set, but it put a spotlight on augments as like the other core part of TFT that really needed some cleanup. And so we've done a big pass here to make sure that like the augments are desirable, the augments are interesting, and there's enough choices at the various stages, okay? But that being said, as we go to PBE, if you guys see augments, you're just like, what the heck is this? Or some of the new ones, we may still need to adjust some numbers, but overall, keep us honest. But here's the list of ones that have been removed. Some are fun ones that just don't make sense in the set, stuff like Moonlight, but others are just stuff that frankly weren't that fun, or were balance problems or things like that, or got replaced with something else. So you can, again, pause this list and look at it, but these are the augments that not going to be in this set. Cool. All right, we brought back some augments, some old favorites. Band of Thieves 2 is back, so you can get some extra Thieves gloves. Binary Airdrop is back. I'm a little nervous about this one, but I'll call it out. We've chosen to bring back the version where the item is completely random. So you can get like 8 full items of value from this item, but they'll be random, right? You'll have a Thornmail or Bramble Vest on your damage dealer and a Sterix on your tank, right? But still a lot of value. So cool. Celestial Blessing is back and has been buffed a little bit. Cruel Pact is back. That's always scary. Cursed Crown is back and now actually gives your team some durability, so it's not a bait. Jeweled Lotus is back. Oh, here's a fun one. No Scout, no Pivot. So no Scout, no Pivot's back, but it has changed, okay? The aura is not, it's not on the units, right? Because no Scout, no Pivot was basically only a reroll comp. And in a set like this, where we have so many 4 and 5 costs, we didn't want this to be a reroll only augment. And so the aura is tied to the augment and it gives it to your team, meaning once you put a unit in, you're stuck with it, but like you can level to 7, you can level to 8, and they're going to get that full benefit. So it should be a much more interesting augment to play around. And if you can play it around well, should be pretty high value. Cool. All right, then there's a bunch of patch notes for existing augments. Again, I'll try to call out the stuff that's really interesting here. Glass Cannon 1 and 2, the starting health has been hit pretty hard. Like, basically, we kept joking that it wasn't Glass Cannon, it was like, it was just too weak. Like, it was not interesting, right? The drawback wasn't good and the benefit wasn't good, so we made it sharper. I'm not confident that's the right move, but we're gonna try it here. So a lot less starting health, but more damage amp. Kingslayer, this is one that was basically only good in like extremely niche situations, but now it'll always give 1 gold regardless of the outcome. So it shouldn't be quite as big of a bait on 2-1. Latent Forge gets a pretty big nerf. And Survivor, yep, Survivor's finally 100 gold, and you get 3 gold to start with. So, oh, and Silver Destiny got nerfed. So is Silver Destiny worth it at 2 gold? We'll see. We'll see. On the gold side, Aura Farming gets delayed. Aura Farming might still be too good. We're going to keep a close eye on that one. Bronze for Life. This is an augment we expect to be very good this set. With the way the trait structure is, with the way verticals aren't quite as good this set, we expect it to be very good. Exclusive customization gets a lot more gold. Explosive Growth and Explosive Growth Plus give a little less total XP, but they give 1 burst right away. So that's pretty good. Gold Destiny gets nerfed. Hard Bargain gets a really big buff here. Hustler got changed quite a bit as well, so Hustler's worth trying if you want to check that out. Know Your Enemy. This is a really interesting augment now, and especially for if there's ever any 4v4 stuff going on, this is going to be the best augment in the game. Because now, in addition to what it did before, which is the whole damage amp that they share traits, you now know who you fight every time. So, kind of a fun augment if you want to take that. Lucky Gloves now gives an extra sparring gloves. Mess Hall became a gold augment, so you can consider that. Quiet Quitting got a big buff. Here's a big news one. Pandora's Bench is now a gold augment. So it's not a silver, it's a gold augment. We wanted to keep it in the game. It no longer appears on 4-2 and gives a lesser champion duplicator. So it's going to be a little harder to do that. Pilfer now has an extra effect. The first time you gain 30 gold worth of champions, gain a Thieves Gloves. So Pilfer should be pretty exciting. Yeah. And then Prismatic. Again, Bronze for Life, getting pretty good here. Buried Treasures now only available on 2-1. Deadlier Blades and Deadlier Caps got a lot better and are Prismatic. Going Long gets more XP a turn. Call to Chaos got a really big adjustment here. We got rid of 3 rewards, the 3 Sniper's Focus, 3 Hull Crusher, 5 Emblems, and 3 3-star. The 3-star 3 cost and 20 gold are gone. And now instead we have 6 unique components, a Spat plus a Frying Pan plus 2 components, a Radiant Lucky Item Chest plus 15 gold in the remover, 2 completed item anvils, and a golden egg. and the RNG Golem has been adjusted. So Call to Chaos will be a bit different this set. So Hold the Line has been changed. Now it's available on 3-2 and has a whole effect that's really nice. Prismatic Destiny has been nerfed. And there's now a Prismatic Destiny Plus if you want to take a chance. And yeah, those are kind of the big ones here. Oh, and yeah, I think Tiniest Titan getting an extra gold is also pretty big. So, cool. And then we have new augments. And again, I'm not going to go over every single new augment here. But these are the trait ones. And you'll notice, by the way, and I want to call this out here, with new augments this set, couple things. You will notice there are no crowns and crests and things like that. With this set, we tried really hard not to have too many 2-1 augments that lock you into a direction. And so with trait augments, you'll notice there's a lot less. We really only were like, if there was a trait augment we were excited about and added something new and was interesting, we kept it. Otherwise, we cut it. We didn't just fill it with trait augments that were like, because we have to have them. We focused on things we thought were good. And so there's some lists here. You can see what they do. But overall, there's just a lot less. Okay. And that's intentional. We spend a lot of our time making the more generic ones. You can see here, Bandle, Bounty, Walk the True Path, we already talked about. Secrets of the Sand is really fun. It's a 3-2, it's a 2-1 only one, but it can guarantee you the path at Shurima. And this is an example, right, where you take this and you know you're playing Shurima late game, but like that doesn't lock you into the rest of the comp. How you get there, what you plan for, keeping your health high, that's still an interesting journey, right? And so like that's why that's a 2-1 augment we're really comfortable with. So yeah. On the other augments, here's some silvers. And again, you'll notice these are a lot of us trying to fill in the gaps of like, oh, we need some like econ 4-2s or some combat 2-1s that aren't a bait and things like that. We have these axioms which provide these unique hexes that are pretty powerful. We have stuff like Carve a Path where you gain a BF sword and then you have to quest. And once you complete the quest, you get 2 more swords, which 3 items for a silver is good, but you have to complete the quest, right? So it comes on a delay. Or like 4 Score, which is a 4-2 econ one where you gain 3 random 4-cost champions. Slightly Magical Roll a single die and gain a bonus. That's fun. You know, silver's not a lot of craziness going on here, but just trying to fill out the roster more of stuff that's pretty safe and will make the game interesting. On the gold side, gold and prismatic are where we spent a lot of our effort here. But again, filling the gaps of things we didn't have. So for example, like econ on 4-2. Well, now you have 3 3s. Gain 3 random 2-star 3-cost champions and 6 gold. Advanced Loan is, I think, our first not our first, but like one of our first real shadow augments. Gain 25 gold. Your next augment is 1 tier lower. We're going to try this. I'll be honest with you. I think that's actually really powerful. But take a look. We also have our champion augments, which I haven't really talked about yet. Hopefully by now on this video, you've seen what the champion augments are, but we made augments that are dedicated to the people who win Tactician's Crowns and the Opens. So for example here, Birthday Reunion is a nod to the fact that when Dish Soap in Inkborn Fables won his final game with Birthday Present and tempoed and did really well. And so we have Birthday Reunion that celebrates that, which is pretty cool. You gain a random 2-star 2 cost, kind of that tempo. At level 6 a component, and at level 9 that random 2-star 5 cost you would normally get from Birthday Present. So pretty neat. And then lastly, last one I want to shout out on this page is sometimes game design is about having fun and shit posting and being silly. And we kept talking about how we wanted an augment where the name of the augment was the same as the text on the augment. And we just thought that was really funny. And so we settled on gain 21 gold. The augment is called gain 21 gold. The text says gain 21 gold. Why? Because we needed an econ augment on 3-2 and we thought it was funny. So that's it. But yeah, like I said, a lot of cool augments here. All generally pretty safe and interesting. Here's another page of them. Spreading Roots, gain 2 random emblems and 1 gold. Again, we don't have crowns and crests, but we do have random emblems. You can still get random emblems and to deal with that. We have stuff like gain a spatula. Champions holding spatula or frying pan items gain 15% attack speed and 2 mana regen. That's pretty neat. But yeah. And then prismatics. Bunch of new prismatics here. You know, stuff like Band of Thieves 2 coming back, Binary Airdrop, we already talked about, Cursed Crown, Prismatic Destiny Plus, etc. There's some other ones here. I think some weird ones here are like the Axiomata. This is a 2-1 only one that gives you 3 random elemental hex augments, and then you don't get to pick any more augments. You just get gold. So we'll see how people like that one. One of my favorites here that I think is pretty damn strong, might be too strong, is Retribution. Gain 2 Hand of Justice. Allies with Hand of Justice can critically strike with their abilities. So basically your Hand of Justice become Jeweled Gauntlets and IEs, which is kind of cool. Component Heist is really fun. It's a 4-2-1 after 6-player combat, so you have to wait until 5-2. But then you get 1 of every component. So 8 components for a Prismatic is pretty solid. Yeah. There you go. And then lastly, we have hero and team up augments. So yes, team up augments are back. We have a couple hero augments. But again, much like trait augments, if they weren't good for the set, we didn't make them. We didn't go crazy here. We still wanted a couple. So that's why they're not seeing a ton here. And to be blunt, if they aren't fun on PBE, we're actually going to disable these pretty quick. But we wanted to give some a try. I think Poison Pals is an interesting one where it's like you gain a Singed and a Teemo and they work together, which is pretty neat. Trials of Twilight is obviously the big one where you get Zaheen. That's a big one, so make sure you take that if you get to see it. That way you can try Zaheen. Dragon Guards leans into the Shyvana and Jarvan thing where they'll work together. That's pretty cool. Chosen Wolves, Ambessa and Kindred will work together. Artillery Barrage turns Rumble into a ranged champion. That's kind of fun. So, yeah. All right, we did it. That is it. How long did we go? An hour and a half. Holy moly. Okay, so like I said, this is PBE. I might be putting out another video. We'll see. Talking about some other things I want to talk about. But overall, this is a set that I'm very excited for. I hope you guys are too. PBE starts in just a couple days, and we'll be making sure this is one of, if not the best set ever. That's my goal. So hopefully you guys are excited as I am. All right, I'm gonna stop running my mouth. This video is long enough. Hopefully you guys are excited. Thank you everybody for your support so far. And yeah, all right, that's gonna do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.